All right, with us right now, Joe Fortunato. He is our film studies professor. We've got film school going on. Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Joe. How you doing?
Good morning, Gene. Good morning, everybody.
Very good. So I understand we're going to talk about a Hollywood classic today. I can't believe it's been, I can't believe that it's been since 1985, since Cocoon came out.
That makes it the 40th anniversary of Cocoon. It was released June 21st, 1985, directed by Ron Howard, written by Tom Benedict and David Saperstein, inspired by the novel of the same name that David Saperstein wrote. It stars a whole host of elderly, because that's part of the story, stars Don Amici, Wilford Brimley, Hume Cronin, Jack Gilford, Maureen Stapleton, Jessica Tandy, then the then youngsters, Brian Dennehy and Steve Guttenberg. In fact, the cast has 3 Oscar winners and 2 Oscar nominees, so it's pretty well represented in that regard. The film itself won 2 Oscars, one for supporting actor for Don Amici, his one and only Oscar win of his career, also for Best Effects. And the film itself was pretty interesting. Steve Guttenberg worked in this movie for less than his usual fee because he really liked the script and he really wanted to work with Ron Howard. And as is kind of customary in Ron Howard films, a lot of his family is involved. This one has kind of everybody. Ron Howard's wife, his brother Clint, his mother Jean, his father Rance, who was an actor in his own right, all appear in the movie. And notably, this is the first film, the first collaboration between director Ron Howard and composer James Horner, who he's worked with on a number of other films, Willow, Apollo 13, The Grinch, Beautiful Mind. So they have a collaboration almost similar to something like Spielberg and John Williams.
Great. So tell us more about why this movie, it was very different and people loved it, but it was because of why? Why was it so different than what had come out before it?
Well, it's pretty unusual to have a movie that stars a lot of elderly people. That is not, even then, it's not the usual fare, and even today it's really not the usual fare. So it was kind of unique in that way. And it's just a warm-hearted story, kind of wrapped in a science fiction, package, I guess you would say. And it was so popular that it was followed by a sequel, Cocoon: The Return, and a few years later in 1988, in which almost all of the original cast returned, which is also a little bit interesting. Kind of funny that in the cast, Hume Cronin and Jessica Tandy play a married couple, and probably a lot of classic film fans know that they were really married in real life. They got married in 1942, and they were married all the way until Jessica Tandy's passing in 1994. So kind of a sweet story there. On the younger side, a couple of people made their debut in this film, notably Raquel Welch's daughter, Tawny Welch. This was her American film debut. She didn't really have much of a career after that, but it's notable that this was her first film. And Nicolas Cage, we like to talk about casting. Nicolas Cage was actually considered for the role of Jack, which went to Steve Guttenberg. And another kind of interesting thing about this film, it's sort of considered a lost film because it's not really shown on cable or broadcast or streaming services for decades. So it's a little bit harder to find, considering its status. And there's a number of films like that. But it is available on physical formats like, if you really want to go old school, VHS and then DVD and Blu-ray and such. So if you want to find it and you can't find it on a streaming service somewhere, you can probably pick up a disc somewhere.
What was memorable to me when I kind of refreshed my memory about the movie before we were going to talk this morning, I had no idea that Don Amici was even in it. I just didn't remember. I certainly remembered Wilford Brimley. And, you look at those folks, from the past, and it's like they were all such huge stars. Jessica Tandy, I mean, it's kind of amazing that he got that kind of a cast together.
Yeah, I know. It's very impressive. And like I said, also quite unusual. And you mentioned Don Amici, and he won an Oscar for the film. So not only was he in it, but he was really in it. He got an award. The somewhat sort of satirical, memorable thing about this film is about Wilford Brimley's age. And Wilford Brimley was only 49 years old at the time of this production. He was 50 when it was released. They had to dye his hair gray to make him look a little bit more geriatric, and he was actually only 11 years older than his on-screen daughter, though, the actress who played his daughter. And what's really memorable, and I don't know if a lot of people know this or not, because it's kind of out there in the internet, and it's been sort of popular in the last few years, that whole thing of Wilford Brimley's age spawned an internet meme called the Wilford Brimley-Cocoon line. And this is a Twitter, I guess now X, account. And basically this is how it works. I don't want to overcomplicate this, but like I said, when the film came out, he was 50 years old when it was released. And, you know, that was relatively young to play a senior citizen. So this resulted in the creation of this online meme, the Brimley-Cocoon line. When an actor reaches 18,530 days of age, which is the exact age that Wilford Brimley was when the Cocoon premiered, that actor has crossed the Wilford Brimley-Cocoon line. So basically, it's sort of a clever, funny way of saying when an actor reaches 50. So if you go to that account, you know, periodically they'll say, oh, so-and-so has reached the Wilford Brimley-Cocoon line, and that means that they're 50 years old. So kind of, it's basically, you know, sort of a interesting way of perception of how aging has changed since the release of Cocoon, the way we perceive aging.
Well, what was so wonderful to me about the message of the movie is that these elderly people, you know, found a new lease on life. I mean, it was so hopeful and it was so sweet. I mean, it was a movie that made you feel good. Yeah,
and, you know, kind of behind the scenes, Ron Howard reported once in an interview that a lot of the elderly actors would sort of have discussions of, you know, in their real lives of, hey, would you take this deal, you know, for eternal alien life, or would you not? And so there is even kind of despite the sweetness of the story, there's kind of a morality question or an ethics question, I guess, to whether you would take that deal or not. Almost a Twilight Zone kind of thing.
I think I'd probably take the deal, but only if I mean, how could you really trust that when you got on the spaceship, they weren't just going to eat you?
Well, that's bringing up Twilight Zone stuff.
You know, I mean, it's like, sure, come with us. We'll let you live forever, you know, and then your lunch, you know.
Well, like, you know, stories. Yeah, exactly. You know, again, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds of other sci-fi things, but, you know, that's a fairly common sci-fi trope that someone gets eternal life and then something happens. They get put in jail or they get put in a cage or whatever. And so there's always a be careful what you wish for kind of thing for that.
Okay, well, it's been a pleasure talking to you about Cocoon. Anything you'd like to add just as we close out, just very briefly?
Yeah, just a couple quick things. One, and I've been talking about this the last couple of weeks. Last night we had our Fortunato Film School Raiders of the Lost Ark at the City of Green. So it was a great time, good turnout. I want to thank all of our listeners, anybody who came out to that last night. And then this weekend, if you are going to the Cleveland Fan Expo, which is sort of our Cleveland Comic-Con, I'm going to be doing a Jaws panel, the Legacy and Legend of Jaws on the 50th anniversary. That's tomorrow at 3 p.m. at Fan Expo. Now, you have to pay to get into the expo, but the actual panel that I'm on is part of that, and so it's free after you pay your way to get in. So if anybody happens to be going there tomorrow, come and say hi.
Where's that going to be at?
That's at the, what do they call it now? The Huntington Convention Center in downtown Cleveland.
Excellent. Well, thank you
and you can also, you know, obviously you can just kind of Google that or whatever, but you can also go to my website for information on that, joefortunato.net, see that, you know, any of my content and just kind of what's going on that might be of interest to you.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much for being on with us again this morning, Joe Fortunato. He is our film studies professor, a film expert extraordinaire, talking to us about the 40th anniversary of Cocoon.